Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles. And it seems we've got our time travelling pants on this week. Earlier this week we had a War Thunder video from the year 2021. And unless I seriously missed my mark, today we're getting a World of Tanks video from the year 2013. Because that's the last time anybody saw one of these little buggers running around in World of Tanks PC. So imagine my surprise when I logged into World of Tanks the other day to find one of these waiting for me in my garage. I thought to myself, are my eyes deceiving me? Have I taken leave of my senses? Am I drunk? Did I go to bed in 2018 and wake up in 2013? Does this mean I'm only 42 again? Quick, I should buy a lottery ticket. But no! World of Tanks is running an event called Well Deserved Reward, celebrating 10 years of World of Tanks, and if you have a World of Tanks account that's at least 6 years old, one of these is waiting for you in your garage. The legend has returned. This, by the way, is Guppy44, who was undoubtedly extremely happy to find one of these things waiting for him when he logged into World of Tanks the other day. Unfortunately, or possibly fortunately, depending on your perspective, this tank is never going to live up to its reputation, and it probably shouldn't, and for a number of reasons. I mean, I'm not saying this is not a good tank. This is a very good Tier 6 light tank, but it's never going to be as good as it used to be, and it probably shouldn't. Hell, it definitely shouldn't, because it used to be ridiculous. You see, to understand what it was that made the T50-2 such a legend, and to understand why it was removed from the game, you have to go back, well, at least as far as 2012. You see, when this tank first saw the light of day, light tanks only went as high as Tier 5, and they had to fight as scouts in Tier 10 battles. Now if that sounds bad, and it was, also take into account the fact that Tier 5 light tanks often didn't have the view range of Tier 9 medium tanks, so they could be outspotted by the kind of tanks that they were supposed to be spotting for their own team. So for Tier 5 light tanks who found themselves in Tier 9 and 10 battles, in the position of being the scout for their team, tended to have to choose one of two types of playstyle, either passive or active scouting. And the passive scouting relied on their using their very high concealment factor to try to get as far forward as possible, find a convenient and hopefully not too obvious bush, and then just sit in it for the rest of the battle, hoping nobody noticed them. Or they could try their hand at a spot of active scouting. Now, active scouting is not to be confused with suicide scouting, although most active scouts ended up being suicide scouts because, well, you're a Tier 5 tank in a Tier 9 or 10 battle. The most infamous examples of suicide scouting tended to occur on the Malinovka map, where the light tanks on each team would tend to just rush across the field, exchange a few shots with each other, and then detect most of the enemy team by virtue of getting shot at and obliterated by them. And in that respect, not an awful lot has changed in the intervening 5 or 6 years. But the T50-2 was a bit of a game changer in that respect. Its view range was pretty terrible, so it still couldn't passive spot. But it could do 72 kilometers per hour. Nothing else in World of Tanks even began to approach those kind of speeds. And so, almost overnight, the T50-2 introduced a whole new era of breakneck speed, seat-of-the-pants active spotting into World of Tanks, because it didn't really matter if you could see it. Good luck trying to hit the little bastard. Now, this was an incredibly fast tank, but it wasn't just the speed that made this tank so ridiculous and necessitated its removal from the game and replacing with the MT-25. You see, there are all kinds of machines that have existed at one point or another, and some still do in World of Tanks, which in the past have had a reputation of being overpowered. But sometimes the source of that reputation does not lie in the tank's statistics and handling characteristics alone. They're a factor, but another major factor is the state of the game engine at the time we're talking about. I'll give you an example. The T-54 Soviet Tier 9 medium tank was often referred to back in the closed beta test as the UFO, the unidentified flying object. And it was referred to as such because it was nearly impossible to hit a T-54 when it was moving at full speed. Now, the T-54 is not a slow machine, but it is by no means the fastest tank in World of Tanks. However, 10 years ago it was, and 10 years ago neither the game engine nor the internet infrastructure was capable of handling the kind of speeds that the T-54 could achieve. And so at the time, it appeared to just teleport around the battlefield, which made it next to impossible to hit when it was moving at full speed. Now, at the time that this machine was introduced into the game, those kind of problems had mostly been resolved. So the tank's insane speed, while it was a factor in the reason why this tank was so overpowered, was not the only reason. You see, the reason this tank was so overpowered was more to do with another limitation of the as-then World of Tanks game engine in combination with the 72 km/h top speed. And what I'm talking about here is physics, or at the time, a lack of it. The introduction of physics changed everything, particularly for light tanks, regardless of how fast they were. In fact, in a lot of cases, your speed became your enemy in a light tank when physics were introduced into the game. You see, before that, it was not unusual to see single T-50-2s, or packs of these little monsters, circle strafing and humiliating enemy heavy tanks, while travelling at speeds of 72 km/h in full turns without slowing down, and with their tracks magically glued to the ground regardless of the surface that they were travelling over. It was physics, or the lack of them, in combination with this tank's ridiculous speed and handling characteristics that made it such a nightmare. Well, those days are long gone. You try pulling those kind of stunts in this T-50-2, you will bleed off speed in the turn. If you don't flip over entirely, you'll hit a bump, go airborne, and when you come down there's a fairly good chance your tracks are going to fall off. So while everybody's getting excited about the reintroduction of the T-50-2, and you should, because it is still a good tank. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say that it's probably better than the tank that replaced it, the MT-25. But while it is a good tank, it is never going to approach the levels of utterly overpowered ridiculousness that it enjoyed back in the day before the introduction of physics. And we should all probably be grateful for that. I don't know if Guppy44 can actually remember what it was like back in the day. I mean, he must. He's got one. Clearly he's been playing World of Tanks for at least 6 years. But just in case he's forgotten, he's about to get a very harsh reminder of what it was like when you were driving one of these machines and you got spotted. But that's one of the things that made this machine so much fun to play. Because every time you hit that battle button with this tank selected, you were going to have to cheat death. But this tank could. And to a degree it still can, because it's still extremely fast, although not as fast as it used to be, 65 rather than 72 km/h, and it's still an extremely small target. Guppy spots the enemy KV, double bushes, but he got spotted before he could move into cover, and there it is! As all hell breaks out around him. That right there is what playing this tank used to be like. All the time, and it was glorious. These days, however, you have to exercise a little bit more caution. He really can't afford to take a direct hit from anything here, and he's not even doing his own spotting at the moment. Double bush like this, however, he is able to finish off that KV-1 and save the AMX-13F3. The T-14 on the island over there is well and truly on his own, and he's managed to kill the Wolverine, but he immediately fell victim to enemy artillery. So that just leaves Guppy44 in the T-50-2, or as I like to refer to it, the Ferrari Testarovska, and the AMX-13F3 over there. The problem here is that while it's highly likely that Guppy's survival is going to depend on spotting targets for the artillery there, he can't actually see anything. Who'd have thought that a KV-2 was so easy to hide? Then again, you got to look at it from their perspective. They're KV-2s. With one light tank and one artillery on the enemy team, they're probably not in any great rush to get spotted either. Nevertheless, one of them has been spotted, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't Guppy who did it. I think the artillery crested the ridge over there, laid eyes on that KV-2, and then ducked back down. And Guppy can't hit him from there. There's a sort of good news, bad news thing going on here. Guppy's actually taken advantage of multiple layers of concealment to ensure that the KV-2 can't see him shooting. And that's a good habit. There's nothing wrong with doing that. It should definitely be encouraged, but he doesn't actually need to, because the KV-2 is so far away, he's outside of his view range. Of course, he's also outside of Guppy's view range, while still being inside his render range, so it's actually the artillery that keeps popping up and spotting that KV2 for him. The exact opposite of what really should be happening. On the other hand, Guppy does have a very good spot here from which to cover the artillery and to attack anybody approaching the artillery, like that KV2. Unfortunately, it's a KV2, and this is only a 57mm gun, and even with premium ammunition loaded at these kind of ranges, he's going to find it difficult to reliably and consistently penetrate it, particularly since the KV2 is angled. And there goes his last round of APCR. He's now the last tank left alive on his team. There's the other KV2, and you can appreciate now, looking at the health bars, why these two were in no rush to get spotted. Regular armor piercing, ironically, is what finishes off that first KV2. Guppy is now the last tank left alive on his team, and he's facing 3 enemies, all of whom are firing high explosive, any one of which is capable of one-shotting him. But he's in a T50-2. First they have to see him, and then they have to hit him, and he's bloody fast. It's not as fast as it used to be, still entirely capable of going airborne when it takes a ridge like that at those kind of speeds. It can do 65 km per hour, not the 72 km per hour that this thing used to be able to do when it was a tier 5 light tank. So what's he doing now? Well, I think he's going artillery hunting. Put yourself in the position of the surviving KV2 on the enemy team. He's got very little health left. You just saw what happened to a KV2 with much more health than him, who pushed into the enemy team's cap circle in order to finish off that artillery. He's probably not in any rush to repeat that experience himself. Probably. However, at the same time, he's probably also having to listen to the demands of the 2 surviving artillery on his team, telling him to do exactly that. And somebody on the enemy team, might be the KV2, might be one of the artillery. The M44's pretty quick, but somebody on the enemy team is trying their luck. Now this of course means that Guppy has no option whatsoever but to go back and do something about it, because if he doesn't, he's going to lose. At this point he can't cap out and win himself. And the enemy team started capping when Guppy was so far away that he didn't really have any other option than to take the most direct and obvious route back to defend the cap circle. So they're likely to be waiting for him, and it is the KV2, who doesn't appear to have any idea whatsoever that he's been spotted, although he probably does now. He's wondering, what's that banging noise on the outside of the turret? And he's got him. Now Guppy did not get spotted there, because he was at least double and probably triple bushed. But somebody took a shot knowing where he was likely to be, and oh look, there's the M44 as well. He's got this. Blind fire, kill again. That just leaves him and the SU-122A, who has no idea of Guppy's exact location, but took a blind shot, and that wasn't a bad guess at all. That's almost exactly where Guppy was when he finished off the M44. Of course, now the shoe is firmly on the other foot. Now it's a one-on-one. T50-2 versus artillery. And back in the day, hunting down artillery is what this thing was for. Well, that and circle strafing isolated enemy heavy tanks and inflicting the death of 1,000 cuts upon them. But as well as that, hunting down artillery is what this thing was for. The only real thing that's changed is that 5 or 6 years ago you would kill the enemy artillery first by driving at full speed right through the middle of the entire enemy team while ducking and weaving from side to side and avoiding everything fired at you, kill the enemy artillery, and then drive back through the middle of the entire enemy team, ducking and weaving and avoiding every shot fired at you. But apart from that, it's pretty much the same. He's going to have to get a move on though. He's only got around about just over a minute left. So where do you think this SU-122A is going to be? Well, if it was an M44, it could have been anywhere, because those things do like to move around. But it's not an M44. It's... oh, hello, I'm spotted. Yeah, there he is. Hasn't moved more than 100 meters from his spawn point. While we're here, just as a little mental exercise, imagine that's a T-29, and this is a T-50-2. Except when it's doing this, It's travelling at 72 kilometers per hour. And that gives you some idea of what this thing used to be like if you were in an enemy heavy tank as well. In fact, you don't have to imagine it, just search on YouTube. You'll have to go back a few years, but there are going to be countless examples out there of the sort of thing that I'm talking about that will illustrate perfectly just exactly why this tank was removed from the game in the first place. Just, do me a favour and don't go looking at any of mine, because most of my videos on this tank were absolutely terrible. Anyway, it's back! It's not the tank that it used to be, and that's probably a good thing, but it's still a pretty good tank. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say that it's better than the tank that originally replaced it, the MT-25, which is great news if you've been playing World of Tanks for at least 6 years, because now you've got one of these. Not such great news if you haven't, because you're stuck with the MT-25. On the other hand, if you're not a proud owner of the all-new, all-singing, all-dancing T50-2, and you are, unfortunately, stuck with the MT-25, you can at least take one small measure of consolation from today's video. Because despite the fact that Guppy44 is playing a premium tank and has a premium account and got a result like that, he still managed to lose 48,000 credits on the result of this battle. Go home, Wargaming, you're drunk. And on that bombshell, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.